one of the persistent myths of awakening is that you can do it. That it is an activity of the personhood. That if you follow certain practices or follow a certain path or add to your database of knowledge and conceptual understanding, that you will arrive at some destination called awakening. This is a great misunderstanding. Because this misunderstanding creates a fundamental error. And that is the error of effort, the error of applying a certain force, a certain sense of control. And this is exactly the opposite of what awakening invites us to. The idea that you can do something to get rid of a few nasty parts of yourself or ugly parts of yourself that you don't like, that you believe to be not good enough or not spiritually advanced enough. Yeah, the idea that you can get rid of these, or the wounded parts, or the helpless parts, whilst holding on to or enhancing those qualities of self that you believe to be a part of the awakened state or the spiritually enlightened state. Yeah, this idea that you can get rid of and add to, and that this will then bring you the icing on the cake. Yeah, you've now baked the cake with the right ingredients, got rid of those ingredients that are not up to scratch, not to your liking. And then the icing on the cake is this thing called awakening. And now everything is very rosy and very sweet and very happy. This whole idea, which often drives the spiritual search, is completely a fiction. It's fictional because it's created by the fictional self, the fictional me, the fictional personhood. What do I mean by fiction? I mean the conglomeration of ideas about yourself, beliefs about yourself, which create the construct of the me, the ego self, the sense of personhood, the sense of me as this kind of person, that kind of person, this kind of expression, that kind of personality, yeah, is made up of a bunch of beliefs about yourself that are mostly based on grievances. Grievances being those places where you feel hurt or have been hurt, those places where you have been abandoned, those places where you have been rejected or misunderstood, those places where you have been denied the truth of your expression. All the aspects of conditioning that go into the human experience. And those grievances become like knots, like nuts and bolts in the scaffolding that hold up your sense of you. Those are the places where you do not dare go to, do not dare be intimate with, because it hurts too much, or it's too ugly, or it's too shameful, or it's too powerless. And those get covered up often by other beliefs about the self, not always, but often, where we might believe ourselves to be really clever, or really capable, or really in charge, or really attractive, whatever it might be, or really lucky. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with any of that when it arises organically or naturally, but when it's held onto as a sense of who I am, consciously or unconsciously, it's a cover-up for a grievance. It's a cover-up for where you feel broken. Yeah, and the whole field of self-help is about allowing the shadow self to be integrated into the whole of you, allowing these hidden aspects of self to have a voice, and that brings a greater sense of wholeness and completeness, and not an attachment to one persona or another. Awakening is the end of all that. Yeah, awakening is both the inclusion of meeting those places where we have been broken and that have been denied, that is necessary, and then going beyond. What does going beyond mean? Going beyond is the demolition project. Going beyond is when that whole scaffolding with its nuts and bolts that hold up a sense of self as either worthy or unworthy, or good or bad, or lucky or unlucky, clever or stupid, or beautiful or ugly, all of that comes tumbling down. There's nothing to uphold. You are not concerned with the nuts and bolts that hold up your sense of self. So awakening is not the icing on the cake. It's not something that you add to yourself. It's what remains when everything that you thought you were, or that you think you are, is seen to be a fiction. It may feel as if it is a truth, as if it is real, because you have become accustomed to that according to your experience of life, to what has happened, and your expectations of what might happen, because that's the way you are. That's the way you've been molded. But it is a fiction. fiction that keeps you in a state of separation, a fiction that keeps you in a state of agitation, a fiction that keeps you in a state of begging and bartering with life in order to get what you want. In order to get the comfort or safety or security according to your conditioned state, to get the love or the approval. But none of it is ultimately satisfying. It simply adds to that bunch of nuts and bolts that keep you locked in. Awakening is not something that you do. It's something that starts to reveal itself. There's an inevitability when it comes to a tipping point, yes? When there is a tipping point in you, in your innermost, that tipping point is when the prison or the suffering of attempting to fix yourself, of attempting to find solace or satisfaction in the world of things, either the things of the mind, positive thoughts, or the things of the feeling, sense, the emotional sense, so positive feelings, positive emotions, or the things of the world, the right relationship, or the right job, or the right, whatever it might be. When that seeking for satisfaction, for solace, for approval, for fulfillment from the world of things comes to a tipping point, it exhausts itself, it is seen to be futile, it is something in you, in your innermost, knows that that's not the place, that's not the answer, that's not the solution. Then that inner exhaustion brings you to a place potentially of desolation. That desolation is not a bad thing. It's a giving up, a surrender of the attempt to control your life, the attempt to do awakening, the attempt to get anything. It's as if the doer gives up. And the doer is central to this knot of personhood, this knot of self. When that doer gives up, something truly transformative can start to happen. When the doer gives up, yes, it may be experienced as a kind of desolation. Yes, it may be experienced as what you might call the dark night of the soul, because that's what it is. I can't do it anymore. I don't know how. All strategies, psychological strategies, spiritual strategies, although those also are psychological strategies, have come to naught. And I don't know the way through. I don't know the way through this prison of me. Then, it's like an inner darkness, but that darkness is fertile. That's the beginning of the light. So what I'm pointing to here is how fundamental surrender is to the path of awakening, if we want to call it a path. Let's call it the nature of awakening, because it's not a linear path. It's not a path of progress. There is no progress. Surrender is fundamental to the nature of awakening. What is awakening? Awakening is waking up out of the dream of a separate me, out of the dream of this fictitious self. When you wake up out of that dream, it's as if your vision has been cleared. You start to see clearly. You don't need to employ psychological strategies to protect yourself from being hurt, to protect yourself from being abandoned or rejected. Clear seeing is an intimacy with your experience. It ends the concern with whether you're a good self or a bad self. It ends the concern with whether you're a spiritual self or an unspiritual self. The whole dream spell of duality comes to an end. It is so natural. It is so natural, it is so clear, it is so obvious, it is so ordinary. When that waking up is seen, is experienced. And yet, absolutely revelatory, because the shift in consciousness is radical. Finally, you see what has never been seen before. And this whole attempt to be the doer, to be the controller, to be in charge, to fix anything, to achieve anything, comes to an end. So much more energy and life force and aliveness is available to you at this point. Of course, there are many nuances to what I'm saying, depending on what is being unraveled in you, what is being demolished, whether there is a clinging or taking ownership to awakening, which is very common, and depending on your karma and your background and all sorts of things. So it's not always that straightforward, but that's the journey of embodiment. That's the journey of the light of awakeness filtering into your vehicle, your vessel, and into your life.